So now we're finding ourselves in the spring of 2002. By this time we've been in this church for a year. Our group formed very quickly. We had, like I said, I think when I did a head count, we had about 45 people counting the kids. And this was spread out over, I think, seven or eight families that we had attending this group. Most of them were married couples. We had a few single people, but for the most part, it was married couples with children. And the group prospered from the beginning. The Lord's hand was on it. I would always, by now I had transitioned into real estate. I was not working for the Olive Garden anymore as a manager. And so I had a lot of free time to be available to the men in the group. And Christine she was self-employed with OTR. Our jobs were flexible in time so that we could sort of swap duties with kids. And our lives were just working very well in the Lord. And things were working in a way where we were able to give our all into the group in prayer, in whatever ministry people needed, meeting with people for breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever. Things were going very well. Benbrook is a small suburb of Fort Worth, and I grew up in that area, went to high school there, and know a lot of people there in that area. Things were going very well. Now, we come from a spirit-filled background. We believe in signs and wonders and miracles, and nothing's off everything's in play. The book of Acts is in play. So we had people being physically healed from various ailments. We had people that were under a lot of demonic oppression that were being brought out of generational curses. There was a lot of prophetic discernment in people's lives, not just in our group, but Christine and I were functioning because I was fasting a lot. My prayer life, I don't know that I've ever had another season where I had a better prayer life than that season. I spent a lot of time in prayer and when I wasn't working, and I was flipping houses in real estate. So I had a real flexible schedule, and I could just give as unto the Lord. And I didn't have a corporation leading me around by the nose anymore. I could do what I needed to do on a daily basis. And in conjunction, we were walking very much in lockstep with the leadership of the church. We knew the elders very well. The senior pastor and I were on very good terms. We knew, we had each other on speed dial on our phones. We had lunch together periodically. I'm not saying we were close friends or anything, but we were getting along very well. The associate pastor of the church was a wonderful man. He and his wife both were just gems. They are. I mean, she's passed away since then. Rick is the guy was probably the most popular guy in the church. The most wonderful man you could ever meet. Loved the Lord. They both did. Both walked very closely with the Lord. His wife was very close with my wife. They became like friends. I met on a weekly basis with the associate pastor because he was in charge of all the home groups. We met once a week at Cracker Barrel for breakfast, and we fellowshipped very closely in the Lord. And I made sure that he always knew what was going on in our home group. I mean, that was really why we were meeting. But in the process of everything, we ended up just kind of, I considered him to be, he started becoming a friend of mine. I considered, even though he was older, and there was nothing that was being hidden. Everything was being disclosed. I journal, and I did journal very closely, not only my personal relationship with the Lord, but my wife journals. But I also kept a journal on our home group because I knew that if I had learned working for corporations that it's always best to track your movement, because if you're ever brought into question about anything, you can kind of give an account. So I kept detailed journals about every meeting that we had with our home group, what was going on in everybody's lives, not in a snitching fashion. I mean, there were certain things that were confidential that if someone told me something was confidential and I knew I could keep it confidential because it wasn't It was something that fit into the confidentiality category. We didn't write those things down, but we kept a general head count of who was involved in what, what was happening at the meeting, so that if there was any questioning about things that were occurring, we could always just say, well, here's the journal. It was just a journal strictly for that group. So we were above board about everything. And things were going very well through, I think it started in March or April. So it was March, April. No, it was probably April. So it was April, May, June, July. Everything was great. Everybody was growing in the Lord. Everybody was doing very well. We didn't have any problems. We noticed certain people had certain deficiencies. Like we noticed that a couple of the girls in our group liked to talk. And when we got about 4 months into this experience, we noticed that these girls not only like to talk, they like to talk too much. And they were a little bit catty, a little bit, their husbands were very quiet. And we noticed that they started to stir up some trouble amongst the women in the group. And the first time we had a problem, an administrative issue with this group, it was with girls that were fighting, women, grown women. And so Christine did very well administratively. She got right in the middle of it. She brought order. She made sure that people were being clear with each other and that there was no gossip or slander occurring that was being left undealt with. She was holding these girls accountable, these women, and it was working. Everything was working. We had one prominent family in our home group. They were a very well-known family in the community. They were a multi-generational real estate family. It was a grandmother, mother, and daughter. The daughter was a young woman in her 20s. The grandmother was the number one real estate broker in the area. I'm not going to say anybody's names. But I got to give you the story. This family, the grandmother, the daughter, and then the brother, the son to the mother, they were all very successful real estate people. They made a lot of money. And they had a lot of spiritual problems. And they attended our group. They were doing very well spiritually at first, through the first probably 2 or 3 months that they attended our group. The grandmother, who was very affluent in the community, her and her husband, they gave a lot of money to the church. They were very gracious people, very down to earth. We had no issues with them. They didn't attend our group, but they would always pull us aside, and the mother especially, and the grandmother, and would thank Christine and I for helping out her daughter and her granddaughter. They'd had so many issues with their granddaughter because she was married to a guy that was a drunk and a philanderer. And he was coming home at night. That the granddaughter lived with the mother. The mother and the granddaughter attended our group. So there's a grandmother, it's actually a great-grandmother, her daughter, her granddaughter, and then the babies that she'd had. So there's 4 generations technically. So this granddaughter, who's in her 20s, she's having problems in her marriage. Her husband is cheating on her. He's coming home at night drunk, can't see straight, stumbling through the door, pants on backwards, another woman's phone number in his pocket. The daughter would take the phone number and call the number, and she got a confession out of the girl on the other line of the phone. Everybody knew what was going on. Well, what do you do with a big mess like that? You pray and you try to help, ask God's help, because you know where this is all going. It's all going towards divorce. So one day the daughter, the young lady, came to Christine and I, and she said, the Lord I believe gave me a dream last night that I issued divorce papers to my husband. And she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, you definitely have spiritual legal grounds to divorce him. And you know the kids aren't safe because he was always threatening suicide. The fact that he was always threatening to commit suicide is a control mechanism to try to garner sympathy." I said, "If you're not careful, one of these days someone's going to get hurt." Because people like that, at some point, if they don't find repentance, they end up hurting someone else or themselves. To me, the fact that he won't stop fornicating, he won't stop drinking, the fact that he's now threatening violence against himself, which means this is a demon, and you know very well that he, can threaten violence against your kids. I'd say it's a pretty good bet that the Lord's showing you to cut ties with this guy. So she had an attorney draw up divorce papers, and she issued them to him. And I was actually over at the house that day that she issued them to him. And the first thing that he did was he said he was going to kill himself, and he started sprinting for the highway, which was literally 30 yards from the house. Highway 377. Typical behavior, threatening behavior. I tried to get the senior pastor on the phone. He wouldn't pick up the phone. He knew what was going on. The first time I called him, he picked up. I told him what was happening. And then things really escalated. Second time, he wouldn't pick up. He disappeared on me. He ghosted me. And I could not figure out why he would not help me to confront this situation. So, long story short, she lets him back in the house within a week, and they all stop attending our group. Come to find out, around this time, the tithes and offerings in the church really started dropping. Now, the church had a $440,000 budget per year at the time on 300 people. I know for a fact that this real estate family, because I was told some very specific information from both the family and so forth, they probably ended up donating about 25% of that church's budget on an annual basis. You can imagine the fallout, the magnitude of having them withdraw from that church. They were right in the middle of trying to hire a worship pastor from Christ for the Nations at the time. The guy that was leading the worship at Christ for the Nations, they were trying to get him to come over and start leading their worship, and they were offering him a six-figure salary. So all this is happening at the same time in this church. So you have our group going, you have us trying to confront spiritual issues, and specifically this one. So remember, it's a grandmother, mother, granddaughter, great-granddaughter. So the daughter that's in real estate, not the young girl that's married, but the other, she's married to a guy that is engaged in necromancy. He won't come to our group. He was going to the gravesite on a regular basis and talking to, it was either his dead grandmother or his dead mother, and he was hearing a voice talk back to him. He was engaged in witchcraft. When I found all this out, I went to the senior pastor and I said, "Man, I need some help. You know these people better than I do. You've known these people longer than I have. Now all of a sudden they're in our laps and we're trying to help them. But I need a little help because I've got the father-in-law who's literally in witchcraft. He won't even come to our group because whatever he's entertaining in his life won't let him. You have his son-in-law married to the granddaughter who's fornicating and drunk and constantly threatening to commit suicide. His family's a wreck. And we need your help holding them accountable, because if we can't get any accountability with them, they're never going to get better. When I told him about what the husband was doing, going to the cemetery, he said to me, the senior pastor said to me, "Oh, yeah, I knew about that. I've been meaning to talk to him about that." And I went, "I'm sorry, you've been meaning to talk to him about that?" As in, he's doing it, but you're not talking to him about it. He's engaged in necromancy. It's witchcraft. Well, when I started standing up, that was not good for me. I started, because this family started backing out of the church. They literally stopped attending the church. And when they did, who do you think got blamed for it? When the tithes and offerings started dropping, who do you think they were blaming? They were, behind the scenes, they were blaming me. I was doing my job, and I was getting blamed, I guess, for making waves. What do you call that? So at the same time that all of this is going on in the group, I'm also involved in a men's group on a regular basis that the senior pastor himself is running. We were meeting in the sanctuary of the church. He had come to me and said, "What do you think about being a part of a men's group that I'm going to lead?" And I said, well, it's funny because the Lord had actually shown me that I was about to become a part of a men's group. I just wasn't sure how it was going to work out or who it was going to be with. I could just feel it coming. And then when he approached me, he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, actually, I think the Lord's been showing me that there's going to be a men's group that's going to form. I just wasn't sure who, what, where, when, why." So he said, "Well, I have an idea. Several of you guys who have calling in ministry, I want to start meeting with y'all on a regular basis." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'd love to do that." So we started meeting once a week in the sanctuary. And when we started that group, immediately the Lord started talking to me about certain men in the group. I'm not saying I was the only one. I'm just saying I was getting prophetic words for people. Some of them were big, some of them were small. Some of them I didn't even know what they meant. I felt that they were coming from the Lord. I wasn't being challenged by anybody that they weren't. I told everybody to pray about it. If it's the Lord, he'll confirm it. If it's not, he'll show you it's not. But we got knitted in pretty tight. The men's group started doing pretty well, but it stayed small. There was about 4 or 5 of us. And what the senior pastor asked us to do was, he said, "I want you guys to get used to preaching. So I want you to each take a week, and you're going to take turns, and you're going to come in here and you're going to stand up in the pulpit and you're going to preach to the rest of us." So it came my turn to do it, and I taught them on wisdom and understanding and how God speaks through wisdom and understanding. Clear direction with plans and strategies. I'll do a teaching on it. I'll do a video on it. And to me, it's the most basic way that God talks outside of music. And when I did this ministry or this teaching, preaching and teaching on wisdom and understanding, you could tell it landed. You know how when you go somewhere and you hear preaching and it lands with you, or you've ministered and you know that what you said landed with certain people, maybe the whole room, maybe with just certain individuals, maybe with one person. You know what it looks like when the Lord lands in a particular setting. Well, I preached on wisdom and understanding, and when I sat down, I came down out of the pulpit. I preached for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. I can't remember. And I sat down in front of the group, and they were like, you could tell the word landed. And one of the guys in the group, he looks at me and he says, "What do you think you're called to? What's your calling?" And I just kind of looked at, I don't even remember what I said. Don't even recall. It's been so long. But the senior pastor looked I don't want to say it wasn't a disapproving look. It was, he looked threatened. So we have this moment where he looks like, there's a saying in the ministry, there's only room for one tree in the garden. He looked threatened. Because he knew that I had a real strong grasp on the scriptures. Probably better than he did. I studied all the time. I had a real strong teaching anointing on me in that season. And because it was what God called us to. And when you take that and you couple it with the fact that I was now touching the golden calf, specifically, we were calling to repentance a group of people in his church that he did not want to challenge, probably because of the money. Who do you think became a target? And this did happen. So this family, real estate family that I referred to earlier, they just disappeared. They stopped coming. And the next thing you know, I was actually one of the ushers in the church that did the collections. I was actually counting offerings. That's how much they trusted our family. So I was helping do collections, and I was being brought into the collection team, and I was helping to count the offerings and fill out the bank statements and put it in the deposit thing and slip it in the safe. And I go to take the offering, and we're about 5 months into our home group, and I noticed that one of the elders, matter of fact, it was the same elder that had the word for that boy that tried to commit suicide. It's the same guy. He came up after I helped take the collection plate, and he walked up to me and he said, "I'll help you with that." And he took the collection plate out of my hand. And that was their way of telling me that you're no longer allowed to help with the offerings. And when we went home, I looked at my wife and I said, "Do you think that they think that we're stealing money?" Because we're never out of sight by ourselves with the money. We wouldn't do that anyways, but I mean, I know people do that, but we weren't doing it. And I started thinking, what in the world is going on? Because I'm getting strange looks from the pastor now. He won't back me up with this wealthy family as we've uncovered all of their idolatry, all of their witchcraft, all of their rebellion. We've uncovered it all. And now I'm having the offering plate ripped out of my hands. And we're starting to have problems with those same ladies in the group that did all the talking and the gossiping. And we got a second wave of that going on now in our group. And our group started to split and fracture a little bit. And I'm asking myself, what is happening spiritually with our group? What is happening with our role in this church? What is happening right now? Because we're doing everything that we believe the Lord is telling us to do. We're trying to do it as faithfully as we can. We are praying 2 or 3 hours a day. We are fasting every week. We are operating in our gifts. We are taking notes at every meeting. We are meeting with the pastoral staff on a regular basis. But it all felt like sand was starting to slip through our fingers. The thing felt like it was slipping away from us. And I did not know what to do except to cling to the associate pastor who I was very close to through all of this. So this whole thing started to blow up. And I'm going to tell you what happened in the blow up stage in another video. I'll do a part 3 because I've been 25 minutes on this one. This thing blew up. And when it blew up fast. And yet the Lord was still talking to Christine and I through this whole thing. As fast as it grew up, it blew up that fast. And I'm going to show you in the next video how the devil just took it apart in just a matter of weeks.